Meanwhile, it's at that same conference where President Cyril Ramaphosa made the announcement that they are still to announce a number of packages to alleviate load shedding in the medium term. Now, meanwhile, the National Regulatory Authority has been ordered by the Pretoria High Court to publish Eskom's application for an increase of 32.66% for the 2023-2024 year, all this happening before the 1st of August. It also have to be a determination on the hike by the 24th of December. For more on this, we are joined by Solidarity Research Institute head Connie Mulder. We have National Freedom Party Member of Parliament Ahmed Shaik Emam and energy expert Yelland. We took, of course, this question to the public. Are the increases by Eskom logical, justifiable? Here's what you had to say.
I think that the bigger problem is the fact that South Africa as a country, we become way too socialist. So there's too many government companies that have way too much responsibility and no competition. For example, Samsung only makes better phones because iPhone is making better phones, you understand? If no one's there to say we can do it better than you, then they don't need the urgency. They can make it whatever and we just have to conform with it.
I don't think the average South African can afford that. And I don't know why Eskom doesn't look to other sustainable, renewable power sources instead of coal, because coal is just going nowhere.
But at the same time, if Eskom had competition, for example, with an enterprise such as Sasol, where that comes now to clean energy, renewable energy, that tariff increase wouldn't be there. But at the same time, they aren't there, and there's no competition. So ultimately, the people that are being subjected to these increase in tariffs, they have no other choice but to submit to it, you know what I mean? So
most of it is obviously due to the corruption in Eskom, and obviously you can't just put a new CEO there and expect him to fix everything, because the people who's corrupt are also people that's valuable and have secrets and stuff or power inside of Eskom. So
go to Ramaphosa's game farm and steal all the couches with the millions of dollars in it, and then they can pay their debt back.
Well, we asked the question to you tonight, are those tariff hikes justifiable? Let's take that question now to our panel joining us this evening. Connie, let's begin with you. I mean, we'll get into the price structure of Eskom in just a moment. But on broad terms, are the proposed Eskom tariff hikes justifiable? Are they just? Are they fair?
Well, I think Solidarity we're of the opinion that no, this cannot be, in the situation we're in, this cannot be fair. However, we must state that Eskom has in the meantime reiterated they've not yet submitted a final application of tariff hike for 2023-2024. After immense public pressure on specifically the 938 Rand that my broadband calculated a solar user would be paying just to be connected to the grid, Eskom has now said that they will revert that to some degree, and actually it should just be a connection fee that enables you then to sell back to the grid as well. So this creates a bit of confusion, quite frankly, and it's worrying that South Africans aren't being informed properly about what is coming. Given the current pressures that's on the consumer, we quite simply cannot afford a 33% tariff hike in electricity that's not always on. We should be incentivizing people to rather generate electricity themselves, if at all possible, and making that as easy as possible for the consumer so that we can get the economy going. Eskom is not going to supply in the energy demands of South Africa. It's not going to make that target this year, and it's most definitely not going to make it next year. So we need to start transitioning out of Eskom whilst stabilizing it as far as possible. So we at Solidarity of the opinion, if Eskom does anything in this tariff hike application that disincentivizes small-scale generation or that punishes users for using less electricity or using their own electricity, this is something that's not rational at the moment. We've got no options left. Eskom is not providing this. We should be promoting self-generation. We should just simply be opening up the grid. We should be saying whoever wants to sell electricity, get the electrons into the grid. Get the country out of this nightmare that we've been in for 15 years, which means we're monitoring what the actual tariff application will be, which should be here by August, with an absolute eagle eye, making sure that we do not do further damage to the economy with this inset cost rising once again, way above inflation.
All right, that's Connie Mulder. You're correct. We did also reach out to Eskom for them to be a part of this conversation. That's what they've said to us. They're saying they're not speaking on this yet because their incomplete application was actually leaked. It has not yet been filed, so they will only talk once it has been filed. Meanwhile, NERSA is also saying they are finalizing their internal processes. But, Shaik Emam, let's talk. Can we be protected constitutionally from the so-called proposed increases that are so much? Or is there room for us to say to Eskom should depart from a point of what can people afford more than a point of Eskom's maximum return on its assets?
Well, let me first of all agree with your last speaker there that the solution to the problem is nowhere near. Eskom cannot and will not be able to provide the energy demands for this country, not today, not in the next 2 years, or not in the next 5 years at least. Let us be very clear about that. Eskom has been mismanaged for a long period of time, and there's a whole host of reasons why Eskom is where it is. I think it is unreasonable, given the service that Eskom provides to the consumers, to even consider anywhere near 32.66 or 32.7%. That's the first thing. Now, let me also reiterate a very important point here. These decisions are made almost entirely or absolutely with the ANC themselves in terms of their NEC meetings and policy conference. In fact, there is very little or no engagement even with Parliament as far as the crisis that Eskom is facing. I know the President has sent out a memo to us that he wants to meet us leaders of political parties at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Whether he's going to have a plan or not, I'm certain he doesn't have one, but he is going to meet us tomorrow. But what is important to note, and like you've just heard, that there is consideration for Eskom number 2. We have not been able to manage one state-owned entity properly in this country, and we're now considering a second Eskom number 2. So, to be honest with you, I think we must understand something, that our hands are tied unless the public rise and do something constructive about this. South Africa is going absolutely nowhere, not just on the energy crisis, but on many other aspects. Yeah. I think we need to understand that.
Chris, let's bring you in here. Is the cost structure, the pricing structure of electricity by Eskom in the country well articulated? I mean, for me, it sounds like the Eskom tariffs determination process is quite a complicated one. For example, you've got non-municipal, you've got municipal, you've got regulatory clearing accounts where things can be claimed retrospectively. You've got all sorts of these variables, and it's quite muddy as to exactly how. Is this how it's supposed to be? Why is it so complicated?
We have a very complex governance structure in the electricity sector of South Africa. Way too complex. It is no longer fit for purpose. So, there's National Treasury, there's the DMRE, there's the DPE, there's COGTA, there's NERSA, there's Eskom, there's municipalities, and they all want to talk about and have a say in electricity, and it is way too complex. The current electricity price determination methodology is out of date, and in the light of the Eskom planned restructuring, there is a new draft pricing policy for South Africa, a document that has gone through the public participation process and may be declared the new pricing policy of South Africa in due course. And now there is in fact a new pricing methodology that is on the table. It is out for public comment at the moment, and the public are invited to make input into this methodology. This whole methodology is under the control of NERSA. I've had a chance to look at this methodology, and it leaves me deeply, deeply concerned. As concerned as I am with the current methodology, the proposed new methodology is frankly unworkable, completely unrealistic, and out of touch with the realities of South Africa. And I fear that we may be moving from the frying pan into the fire. Yeah. Of course, this new methodology has not yet been adopted, It is not a legal process, I must tell you. It's an internal NERSA process, but they are bound to consult with Eskom, with municipalities, with National Treasury, and with the public. One thing I can tell you for sure, because I attended a briefing by Eskom last week, if this is adopted in any way like it is at the moment, it will be subject to immediate legal challenge by Eskom.
So what is the approach? Because we do know how we got here is that Eskom applied for multi-year tariff increases, but NERSA said, hold on, we cannot give you that because you are now applying here using the old methodology for this new financial year, which is what we're talking about, 2023-2024. So go back and wait and reapply when we have this new methodology. But the courts have now said, no, you need to publish these tariffs. So what is the approach that NERSA is suggesting now going forward?
Yeah, look, the approach is unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your view, I believe it's a very populist approach, and it may appeal to Ahmed and Connie on this panel, because the starting point of this approach is to kind of look at customers and ask customers, what price are you prepared to pay?
Yeah.
And no longer will there be the process where Eskom works out its revenue needs and submits a price application, and NERSA considers it and makes a determination. The new pricing methodology proposed by NERSA is to really ask customers, what can you afford?
Yeah.
And it will consult and do surveys to find out what customers want in their price, and finally they will reach a what they might call an acceptable price to customers, and then work back the tariffs. And now NERSA will determine the tariffs, not Eskom any longer. And finally, we will, the tariffs will become what we pay for electricity. It sounds quite appealing if you're a customer, and I'm sure customers will play the game mercilessly.
It sounds really, really appealing. Why do you believe that Eskom will challenge that? I mean, of course they will challenge that because Eskom wants more money. They've got a debt burden. They've got municipalities who are not paying them. They are overspending on diesel. And so on and so forth. So I'm sure they will not agree to that. But if something of that approach was to be in place, how bad would things get?
No, I think any rational analysis of this new pricing proposal will indicate that it is unworkable, it is irrational, and not only that, it contravenes the law, according to Eskom. So that it will be challenged on specific legal grounds, which I can go into if you want, but I think
we'll circle around and come back to that. Connie, let's bring you in. What do you make of this proposed new approach by NERSA to determining the tariff?
I think we need to take a step back and realize that the reason we're in trouble is because we've still got the system of NERSA determining prices for the whole of South Africa, when this should be something the market does. And that is where, at Solidarity, we're just plain simply, we're fed up. We've now had 15 years of not having power. We've had a president that has now promised for 3 weeks an imminent announcement. So we're suspecting that meeting of parliamentary leaders is most likely in the smart city that he promised 2 years ago. We just plain simply do not believe him anymore. And we don't trust the government to solve this crisis anymore. And that is why we went the direction of saying, please allow the private sector and the market to solve this problem. Just get out of our way. Let us do this. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in the methodologies of how do you determine what Eskom should pay? Because Eskom is in a debt spiral, quite frankly. They're not generating enough product to sell to cover their debt costs. That means they need to take on additional debt, which then it means they need to increase tariffs on their product, the little that they do sell. The only way that we're getting out of the debt spiral with Eskom is, unfortunately, that debt is taxpayer guaranteed, and the country's economy will have to pay it at some point. And the only way we get to do that is by growing the economy. And the only way we get that is by ensuring energy stability. And from our perspective, there is no way that we can do energy stability with government as the sole or leading player, in fact. We're begging the government, please, you're stuck in the headlights. You've been stuck in the headlights for 15 years. You're holding us on the tracks now. We want to solve this problem. Either become part of the solution or at least just allow us to solve it for you. We're just way too fed up. The economic damage that load shedding has done in the last 15 years is incalculable. You cannot measure how much damage has been done to this country. And we've now had plan after plan. We've had imminent announcement. Whatever government does, we don't think it's going to work. This is the time where you should allow the private sector to do a very simple thing, which is provide a good to customers that want it. The private sector is good with that. They can do it. There's no reason we shouldn't be opening the grid up as quickly as possible. If we do that, I know Chris is a bit more pessimistic than me on this. He says we can solve load shedding in 2 years. I think we can do it in a year if we do it that way. If we just simply allow private generation as quickly as possible and remove all the red tape that we're currently throwing on this, then we wouldn't have to worry about NERSA's methodology, how Eskom needs to generate that revenue, any of those things. None of that makes sense. This is an area where the market and wholesale trading should take over.
So will you be outright rejecting any suggestion of a tariff charge for solar users? Are you saying this is a disincentive, really, at this particular point to get in more solar users? What happens? Because when the sun is not there, or when your batteries are not adequately charged, or something happens, there's rain for like 7 days, at some point you're going to need to be connected to the Eskom grid. What do you suggest should happen there?
I think the part that sort of got our tails up and said, but this doesn't make any sense, is that you're going to penalize people for not using, instead of just getting an access and then allowing them to sell back. Now, Eskom has reiterated that the goal of this is that you will be paying about 200 Rand to 218 Rand a month. That would connect you to the grid, but it would also allow you to actually sell the power that you generate back, because you're quite right. In the evenings, the sun does not shine. But during the day, when you're generating more power than we need, you can use that power to power a bakery somewhere that Eskom is not doing at the moment. And that is, if we can get to that situation where you've got small-scale generation where you benefit from being connected to the grid directly by selling back to it, that makes a lot more sense. The tariff proposal, as My Broadband estimated it with the documents that they showed, was that you would be paying 938 Rand just to be connected to the grid if you use none of it. And you cannot, with the opportunity to sell back, very limited. This would have been disincentivizing small-scale generation, and that would have set us back in the struggle to get out of the power crisis quite a bit. If they change it to say, all right, connection fee, which makes sense, you just to be connected, but this enables you to sell back to us as well. That's something that makes a lot more sense, and that we would not necessarily outright reject. We'd say that makes sense, given the price, obviously. But this is the direction we need to be going. The solution for South Africa's energy crisis lies on the roofs of hundreds of thousands of South African citizens. It doesn't lie in another Medupi or Kusile, and it especially does not lie in an Eskom 2.0. That is like building another Titanic to solve an iceberg problem. It is not going to work.
Shaik, Emam, regulatory reform to make it easy for people to generate their own electricity from a lawmaker point of view. How far are we from that? Is that something that we could have achieved, at least in the short term, 12 months, maybe even 18 months, to get things going?
Well, I think we're in the process at the moment. If you see the city of Cape Town or the Western Cape government, they are in line to have their own, generate their own energy, which I think is a good thing. But I think, there's another point that we are actually not considering. That, yes, indeed, I must agree with that you must have an alternative supply of energy supply, and that's through the independent power producers. There is no doubt. Eskom is not going to solve your problem. But at the same time, we need to understand that Eskom is 400 billion rand in debt, which the taxpayers have to pay, looking for another 45 billion. Now, the more independent power producers that come in, an alternative energy supply that you get, simply means that the demand for Eskom energy will be less. The expenditure will be the same. They still have to pay these debts and things. What does it simply mean? It simply means the collapse of Eskom. And I think that's one of the things we need to consider. But of course, if we have to weigh what is more important, to boost the economy through ensuring a consistent energy supply, or do we have to worry about Eskom? Because Eskom is in a state at this point in time that I can't see them coming out of. So, and then the other problem is this: when we talk about independent power producer and alternative energy supply.
Okay, challenges there with that connection. I hope it's not load shedding with the Shaik Emam. We'll try and get him back on in just a moment. Right, Chris, let's talk about that. The previous application, right, for the 20.5% increase, Eskom was fighting there vehemently, saying the reason why we need this increase is because of two factors, and which is, I suppose, what the Shaik Emam is also raising. The one is that IPPs are costing us more. So the rise in more independent power producers is costing us more to get them into stream. Right? Two, the carbon taxes. How true are those? I think they said they amounted for about 13.8%.
You know, there was this calculation done by people in the media, basically, that we are looking at a possible application by Eskom for a 32% increase on the 1st of April next year. I must stress that calculation was based on the multi-year price determination application that Eskom made a couple of years ago. And they are about to submit a revised application taking into account the realities today. And those realities are that there is potential downside to that application. So that 32% is an estimation based on a very worst case situation as of 2 years ago. And in the meantime, there is the possibility that the carbon tax will be phased in slower in South Africa, and that the IPP costs will be lower than what was estimated 2 years ago. And this gives quite a significant potential downside to this application by Eskom. But I think it's important to note that the application this revised application hasn't been made yet. So we can speculate till the cows come home. Also, this carbon tax has not yet been delayed, but it might still be delayed. The point of the matter is I think we have to wait a little while to see Eskom's actual application, and that will then play out, and there will be a chance for the public to oppose this vehemently as through the public hearings, and that's all good and proper as it should be. And I hope the public and industry and business take advantage of these public hearings to make their voices heard. Also, please remember that NERSA very seldom gives Eskom what it wants. Yeah. Usually it gives Eskom much less than it asks for, and then Eskom takes NERSA to court for not giving it what it needed.
You've got the regulatory clearing account, which allows Eskom to be able to claw back what they don't get from NERSA, and I wonder how much is that, retrospectively speaking, is then allowed to be added to the next tariffs in a manner that we've been seeing, the kind of increases that we've been seeing.
I must stress that the regulatory clearing account also enables customers to claw back over claims by Eskom. So the regulatory clearing account is a retrospective mechanism by which adjustments can be made for wrong assumptions. Remember, the price applications are made as a year or even several years in advance. And when the actual figures come out, for example, the coal cost, the diesel cost, etc., a retrospective calculation is done, which could be to the benefit of the customer, or it could be to the benefit of Eskom. So I don't think we must always just assume that the regulatory clearing account, enables Eskom to claim back a lot more than it should.
Let's take a break. When we continue next, we'll get more of your views. By the way, let us know, do you think the proposed Eskom tariff hikes, albeit from the media speculating at this particular point, would be justifiable, just and fair? Otherwise, let us know your thoughts on 072-110-5584, or you can go to our poll on Twitter and you can vote there, yes or no. In Focus continues shortly. Back tonight on In Focus here on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. Conversation continues. We've got Solidarity, we've got the National Freedom Party, as well as energy expert Chris Yelland with us tonight. And we are, of course, interrogating some of the reports that we have been seeing. In fact, the Democratic Alliance also saying they will take any decision by Eskom to raise tariffs by 32.6% to the High Court if needs be. But, of course, some clarity coming in from Eskom saying, well, they've not yet finalized their application as far as that is concerned. Some of your tweets tonight to our question. Let's have a look at what you're saying. Eskom has far too long been in this predicament. Tariff hikes won't solve their problem. The challenges are rather technical, leadership and management, as well as innovation-based. Government has been assisting them financially, a never-ending crisis. Some sectors within are making profits. Peter saying no money will save Eskom. Arrogance is what needs to be dealt with. Sheshe is saying, why should we keep getting billed exorbitant amounts for non-service? This doesn't make sense at all. Some of your thoughts tonight. You can also go to Twitter and let us know what your views are on our poll question, and we'll bring you those results a little bit later on. Back to our panel then this evening. Connie, what do you make of what the Emam is raising there around the suggestion that you're making? We put solar panels on 120,000 homes. More and more people will be relying on Eskom, and Eskom will certainly have some struggle in operating.
I think that's just stating a fact. Is Eskom already has a struggle in operating. When we look at Eskom's fiscal situation, they are going to at some point default on their debt. There's no way that they will be able to pay it back. It has steadily escalated. They cannot service the debt completely, and they're once again applying for another debt, which means either we're going to do endless bailouts or we will have to pay that debt. But that debt will not be paid by Eskom. It will be paid by the South African taxpayer at some point in the future. And unfortunately, our government cannot afford this for the fiscus. So we're of the opinion the only way that we can actually be able to pay that debt is if we get the economy growing. Otherwise, we're going to be in serious, serious trouble fiscally, which we're already in as a government. It's going to be even more pain. And that means, quite frankly, we need to, there's no way out of that. We've got government guaranteed debt that we extended to Eskom. We are in the hole for 400 billion rand as the taxpayer. There's no way out. We saw the same with SAA, for example. It's 27 billion rand that you can basically write off, but it has to be paid by government. They've backed it. We would much rather be paying that from an economy that's 20 or 30% larger, with a tax base that's 20 to 30% larger in 5 or 10 years' time, than paying it with one that is either the same size or smaller, which is what would happen if we do not transition into renewable, into energy stability. And that is the harsh reality that we're facing. There are unfortunately no cheap outcomes, no cheap ways out of this anymore. The best time to build a power station is 20 years ago. The second best time is now, and we've not done either of those. So now we need to start immediately. And I think that's it's rough. We could have gotten out of this situation cheaply if we'd only done a bit of planning. If we'd listened to Eskom in 2001, 2002 as government, that would have also not put us in the situation where we're not generating enough electricity to meet our economy's demands. And the harsh reality is, at some point in the future, if we continue on this, we will be generating enough electricity to meet the economy's demands, but it will not be because we're generating more electricity. It will be because our economy has deindustrialized and we're now back in the Middle Ages. Now, this is not something that anyone wants. We want people off the streets. We want them in jobs. We want to create a large and thriving middle class. Yeah. And Eskom cannot do that at the moment, which means we're going to have to take the pain at some point. We'd rather take the pain from a richer economy, which we can only get by getting energy stability, than we take it from an economy that's going to be on its knees for the next 10 years and then going to be shot when Eskom...
What do you suggest must happen with that 400 billion rand debt at this particular point? Because I know Treasury is also still contemplating exactly how do they get that. Others are saying, I think it's COSATU saying, at least get 50% of that debt off the balance sheet of Eskom and give them some room to breathe.
Well, it's on the balance sheet, but it's on the balance sheet theoretically. It's 350 billion of that 400 billion is government guaranteed, which means it's there, but if Eskom doesn't pay it, government has to pay it. Otherwise, the country defaults, and we saw what happened with that with Greece and those countries, where then you've got some serious issues. You've got massive outflows of capital. You've got we're already junk status, but we would really be an uninvestable destination at that point. So the harsh reality is we are going to have to pay that debt. There's no way around that. We cannot write off the debt that government guarantees. It doesn't work like that. Eskom is the biggest one, but even there are cross-debt covenants in that as well. As Eskom defaults, then all state-owned institutions that have government-guaranteed debt would most likely, that debt would immediately become payable. And that would be a fiscal crisis like no other. We would be looking at either hyperinflation to try and pay it, or we would just plain be getting an IMF bailout. with severe penalties linked to that, which would have a massive impact on the fiscus. So we've got no way out of this. We've been spending recklessly like a drunken sailor, as government has done, and now finally the hangover is here, and we need to at some point start acting like responsible adults with the wallet.
Shaik, Emam, there's no way out. The default will come, whether now or later, and the country will have to pay up.
Yes, I must agree. But more importantly, I think we need to understand it's not money that is going to solve the problem with Eskom. Eskom has got a skills crisis. Eskom has got a problem as far as cadre deployment. Eskom has got a problem as far as corruption and looting. Eskom has got a problem as far as vandalism and security issues. Eskom has got a problem. It's got ailing or aging infrastructure and have not done much in ensuring that new infrastructure is able to deal with the additional demand. You can see what happened to Kusile and Medupi, what the original estimates and where they ended. And I'm told that it will never be fully functional at any given time. So the problem with Eskom is a lot bigger than we think it is. And I must say again, money is not going to solve the problem with Eskom. Eskom is not going to solve the energy crisis. Remember that during the stage 6, we were losing 4 billion rand on a daily basis. So it's not going to come right anytime soon. So I think it's very important to accept that. We have failed as far as Eskom is concerned. If we want to boost economic growth in the country, we have to look at alternative energy supplies, but that also simply means that means the beginning of the end of, or the collapse of Eskom, and there's no doubt about that.
Articulate what you've just said, particularly around the skills challenges, around what you call sabotage, around aging fleet and so on and so forth. From a political point of view, I mean, what do you make of this argument that says, I mean, we're already short of skills for one generating utility. Let's have another one to come and compete with the one that is currently not doing well. What is the political justification of that, and what's the way of thinking? Of course, everybody's saying have competition in this space because then it will certainly help us with energy security, so that when one fails, at least we've got another one that is able to produce. But both of these are going to be state-owned.
Yeah, look...
I think first of all... Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, Shaik Emam. Shaik Emam, you can jump in there.
First of all, I think this is the ANC trying to appease a particular faction in the ANC. And or secondly, I think very importantly, it is another environment they're creating for corruption and looting and cadre deployment. Otherwise, there's absolutely nothing there to convince politicians, convince, I think, the experts that we have on the panel, and convince any ordinary South African that there's a need for a second entity, given the fact that government has been dismal in its performance of all state-owned entities in the country. So really, they haven't made a case. I hope that they will not pursue this. The only problem that I have, even with public participation processes, I'm not aware of any one of the bills that has been passed in Parliament thus far in the last couple of years where the public have been opposing it vigorously and that government has listened to them. I don't know of one of them. And that's what my concern is, that whatever they want to push and pass, based on the majority that they enjoy, they will go ahead and do these things. And that's the problem we're sitting with.
Yep. Chris, you can wait.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree entirely with Ahmed that this proposal is poorly thought through. Something like this, you would have thought, would have been subjected to intense consultation within government, within Treasury, and with economists and people who are well versed in electricity for a significant time. Just the way it has been presented, a kind of an off-the-cuff remark by the president at a South African Communist Party gathering, where he kind of in passing said that he heard this idea from Mr. Mentashe, and he thinks there might be something in it. I just think that the very way in which it's presented to the public indicates that it is poorly thought through. It hasn't actually been thought through at a serious level. And I'm not sure how seriously we should even take this concept. But I don't think it's a good idea. I agree with Ahmed, I agree with Connie in that respect.
What is, are we past that point maybe, of having a conversation about what is allowable revenue? Because I suppose those are the considerations that NERSA looks at as Eskom makes its assumptions in its application. Are we past the point of saying to NERSA, these are the allowable revenues for Eskom, or what you should actually consider?
Yeah, look, I think we can accept, and I believe that the current methodology has outlived its purpose, and we need to be looking at something very, very different. I personally believe that simply replacing this current methodology with another methodology in which NERSA is in control is really dangerous for South Africa, because NERSA is under-resourced, under-capacitated. It has shown through multiple decisions that it cannot operate within the confines of the law. It is being challenged on almost every decision that it is made, and it is losing. And it's a sign that it really doesn't understand its own processes. In some cases, it doesn't even stick to its own methodology, and that's the basis in which it's challenged in court. So to think that NERSA can now just set tariffs and implement the whole thing under its control, I think is not even practical. And as I indicated before, Eskom believe that it is illegal, and there are definite legal grounds on which they intend to challenge it. But having said that, I think we've just got to think about the future of the electricity supply industry. And the future is being articulated through a document called the Draft Amendment to the Electricity Regulation Act, which has been gone through the public participation process or public comment process and still has to go through the parliamentary process. And I think this lays out a vision for a future electricity supply industry in South Africa, in which there will be an independent grid company, a competitive and diversified generation sector, and restructured distribution sector, a multi-market approach to the supply and sale of electricity through wheeling of power in bilateral trades, through trading through an electricity market, through literally thousands and thousands of customers becoming generators of electricity, as Connie has pointed out, that the future actually in the generation sector is a number of large generators, former Eskom generators, a number of public-private partnership generators, a number of municipal generators, several hundred independent power producers, and literally thousands and thousands and thousands of embedded generators on the rooftops of homes, of commercial entities, industrial companies, factories, warehouses, mines, farms throughout South Africa. Literally hundreds of thousands of new generators bringing power to the grid. This is the future that we should be working towards. The transition is not easy, but we need to get on that road quickly.
Right, we appreciate all of you for coming on tonight and being a part of this conversation tonight. That is Connie Mulder, Shaik Emam, the National Freedom Party Member of Parliament, as well as energy expert there, Chris Yelland. Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that officials will soon announce additional measures to reduce load shedding in the country. He says the intensifying power cuts have exacerbated the need for urgent reforms.
All of us are hugely unhappy with the load shedding that we have all been experiencing in recent weeks. And this has demonstrated the need for the urgent reforms that we need to implement. While we have embarked on several measures over the last 4 years to increase the generation of capacity in the country, this is not happening fast enough. We have been finalizing and will soon be announcing a package of additional measures to reduce the severe load shedding that we have been experiencing in the medium term, to end load shedding in the medium term as well, and to ensure that we have energy security into the future.
That is President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking at the closing of the ANC's elective conference in KwaZulu-Natal. He's articulated on what plan and measures are in place to deal with load shedding. Well, we've asked you the question, are the proposed price hikes by Eskom of 32.6% fair? And this is how you have responded tonight to our poll question. 5.1% I beg your pardon of you saying no. Meanwhile, 5.1% of you, I beg your pardon, saying yes, and a resounding 94.9% of you saying no.